Today, I'm going to show you how to make perfect braised beef short ribs with creamy Parmesan polenta. To get started, I'll grab 5 to 6 pounds of short ribs. I'm going with bone-in here because in my experience, those are a lot more widely available than boneless, and I want you guys to be able to recreate this recipe exactly like I am here. If you don't have access to short ribs, you can still play along. Just sub in 12 3 to 4 ounce chunks of beef chuck. Now to prep these up, I'll hit each short rib with a little ziggy of neutral oil to help grab the salt and transfer heat to the meat. Then I'll liberally season each piece of beef with salt, like a lot of salt. I'm going for a strong 3-finger pinch per piece. And once I've got all this meat salted up, I'll let it cure on the counter for 20 minutes to help the beef hold on to its moisture when we cook it and to make it taste more beefy. Next, I'll throw my sheet tray into a preheated 500F oven and give it an oven sear for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, while those brown up, I'll bust out my knife work. For that, I'll grab 3 to 4 large onions and give them a medium dice. I'm using yellow sweet onions here because they caramelize quickly. More on why that's important in just a second. In total, we need 1,000 grams of medium diced yellow onions. That's a lot. Now, the only other aromatic that we're going to be using in this dish is garlic. In total, I need 20 to 25 grams broken down through my garlic press, which is usually about 6 to 7 large cloves. From here, I'm going to grab a large, heavy bottom pot, specifically one that can hold about 6 quarts of liquid or more, then drop it on my stove over medium heat. First thing in is a long squiggle of olive oil, then in goes my onions, the garlic, a very strong pinch of salt, and then a stir to combine. I'm going for a French onion soup vibe with this braise because beef and sweet roasty onions is like an S-tier combination up there with peanut butter and jelly. So to get these lightly caramelized, I'm going to stir them every 2 minutes or so over medium heat for about 20 minutes. I'll check back here in 5 to see if we're getting any color. Back in my oven, the short ribs are looking really nicely browned, so I'll pull them out. Oh, also you can see the fat on the outside of this beef is rendered fully. That's actually really hard to achieve with a stovetop sear because rendering takes several minutes of direct heat. When you're searing on the stove, the meat is really only in contact with the pan for like 60 or 90 seconds, and that's just not enough time to properly melt the fat. For now, I'm gonna let this short rib chill and then check back on my onions. After 5 minutes, you can see there is quite a bit of caramelized brown bits stuck to the bottom of the pot. So to get that off the pot and into my onions, I'll deglaze it with a couple tablespoons of water and then scrape with my wooden spoon. Now to get these onions as caramelized as I want, I'm gonna repeat this brown and deglaze maneuver 3 or 4 more times over the course of the next 20 minutes until the onions are about a 6 out of 10 caramelized. Next, I'll deglaze that last little bit of onion stuff with 50 grams of wort. Then I'll use my spoon to scrape up the pot and cook down this wort for about 30 seconds. From here, I'll add in 50 grams of tomato paste and I'll stir fry that with the onions and wort for about a minute or so. Next, I'll add in 1 container or 42.5 grams of pre-made demi-glace. If you're not familiar, demi-glace is essentially a very gelatinous roasted meat stock that's been reduced into a meat syrup. It's super useful, but also very, very impractical to make at home. Luckily, you can buy passable demi-glace off the internet, or you can get it at most mid to high-end grocery stores. I'll link to this product specifically down in the description below if you want to buy it, and I think you should because it's super useful, not just for braises like this one or for my beef bourguignon recipe, but also for pan sauces like bordelaise. If you don't have or aren't going to get demi, sub in beef bouillon paste. Just use 25 grams instead of 50 because bouillon be salty. Behind demi or bouillon, I'll add in 2 beers worth of Guinness Stout. That's about 900 grams. I really like the dark malty sweetness that stout brings to a braise, and I think it's particularly excellent with short rib. But if you're gluten-free, I'd say sub in red wine, or if you're alcohol-free, I'd say sub in 1 can of Coca-Cola and make up the rest of the liquid with beef stock. Speaking of that, I'll add in 1,100 grams of store-bought beef stock into the pot. Then, to help mimic restaurant quality stock, I'll add in 4 envelopes or 28 grams of powdered gelatin. This is gonna give the braising liquid a really velvety, full-body texture that's gonna glaze up the meat in a really beautiful way once it's reduced. Lastly, I'll add in a few sprigs of thyme, a few bay leaves, and then I'll bring it up to a simmer and then snuggle in my oven seared short ribs. Once everything's in the pot, I'll pop on a lid, leaving it slightly ajar. Then I'll move it to a preheated 275F oven and braise for 3 to 3.5 hours. By the way, I'm leaving the lid ajar here to allow for some evaporation, and it's going to keep this braise from getting too hot. Lower temperatures lead to more unctuous, juicy beef. While that cooks, I'm going to thank Cook Unity for sponsoring this video. Cook Unity delivers fresh, prepared, restaurant-quality food from award-winning chefs to your door every week. The chefs at Cook Unity make meals in small batches and use humanely raised meat, organic ingredients when possible, and fresh seasonal products to maximize flavor and nutrition. Cook Unity meals are created by a roster of all-star chefs, including Food Network alumni, James Beard Award winners, and acclaimed restaurateurs. I loved this adobo flank steak with paprika potatoes and broccoli from cookbook author, James Beard Award nominee, and all-around culinary bad girl, Anat Admony from New York City. Since I'm in the middle of filming today, lunch is going to be this Cook Unity kale salad with chili roasted shrimp from Chef Chris Rattel. Overall, I'm very impressed with the quality of Cook Unity, not just the recipes, but also the ingredients themselves. They look and taste better than a lot of the other prepared meal services that I've seen. To give Cook Unity a try, go to cookunity.com/BrianL50 or click the link in my description below and use my code BrianL50 to get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity. 3 hours and 15 minutes later, I'm going to pull out this braise to see if it's tender. Texturally, I do want the beef to easily pull apart, but I definitely don't want it to fall apart. Keep in mind that this beef is going to continue to cook for a little bit longer, and it's going to get even more tender from here. And after 90 minutes of cool down, I'm going to throw this pot into the fridge to further cool overnight. This step allows the flavor compounds to consolidate, making everything 25% more flavorful, while also allowing the beef to reabsorb some of the liquid that it lost during the cooking process. So it gives you juicier meat. The next day, or 45 minutes before dinner, I'll pull this pot out of the fridge and get rid of all of that coagulated fat on top. I'll just do that with the spoon the best I can. Don't stress about getting every single bit here. The gelatinous nature of the stock underneath is going to make that kind of hard. Just get what you can. Once defatted over medium heat, I'll bring this pot up to a low simmer to melt the gelatin. Then I'll move all 12 of my tender short ribs over to a plate so I can reduce this braising liquid without overcooking and drying out the meat. I'll drop my pot back over medium-high heat and then use a little ladle to skim off any fat that's left behind. The move here is to swirl the simmering liquid with the bottom of a ladle. This pushes the fat to the outer rim where it's all consolidated, and that makes it much easier to capture. From here, I'm going to reduce this sauce by about 75%. That's going to take about 20 to 30 minutes. So while that finishes, I'm going to make the creamy, velvety polenta to serve these short ribs on. To make it, I'll scoot this reduction to my back burner, then drop a deep nonstick pan over medium-high heat. In goes 300 grams of polenta, and then I'll toast it, stirring often for about 3 minutes. And when I say polenta, I mean cornmeal, but a specific grind of cornmeal. Polenta is generally uniform, has a medium-sized grain, and most of the powdery stuff has been sifted out. This allows the grains to cook more evenly and saves you from having the large, hard, and sharp kernely stuff in your final dish. If you can't find this specific polenta or something like it, I would say medium grind cornmeal can work, but you'll need 20% more water and 20 to 40% more cook time. And after 3 minutes of stirring, this polenta is toasted up and smells like popcorn, so it's good to go. Next, I'll add in 1,200 grams of whole milk and 7 grams of salt. Next, I'll jump in with a not metal whisk and stir this to evenly hydrate the polenta. And after about 3 to 4 minutes, the milk will be up at a simmer and the polenta will have started to thicken. So I'll stir it to keep from sticking to the bottom of the pot and spitting hot, ploppy polenta all over my sandaled feet. And then I'll turn the heat down to low and cook this polenta, stirring every 2 to 3 minutes for about 10 more minutes. When the polenta is looking kind of like thick scrambled eggs and the grains appear to be swollen, I'll taste it for doneness.
Texturally, this is perfect. Every single grain of cornmeal is swollen and tender, like just past al dente. It's got a little bit of a chew, but it's not husky or tough or grainy, and it's not getting stuck in your teeth.
To finish, I'll add in 115 grams or a whole stick of butter, and I'll stir that in to melt it. And once it is, I'll add in 100 grams of grated parm, and then over low heat, I'll stir that in to melt. Don't go too high with the heat because that'll overcook this aged cheese and make your polenta kind of greasy. You guys, polenta is very underrated in my opinion. Most people don't make it or don't even know that it's a thing. And that's a shame because it's fluffy, creamy, buttery, and is as good or better than any mashed potato. Back at the stove, my oniony beef liquid has reduced by about 75%, and the bubbles are about a ½ inch wide. That's how I know the viscosity is good to go. Next, I'll move my short ribs back over into the pot, making sure to get them all submerged in a little bit of sauce. Now the pot goes back over low heat for 5 minutes to finish heating these short ribs through and to allow me time to baste them up with the silky, inky, beefy cooking liquid. Now to serve, I'll slide 2 pieces of my short rib onto my creamy, cheesy polenta. Then I'll spoon over a generous hit of the caramelized onion stout jus. And that is a 10 out of 10 on the comfort scale, you guys. guys. This dish is unbelievably beefy. It's just a little bit sweet, and it has a touch of grassy, malty flavor from the beer. This is a restaurant level dish that you can easily make at home. Please give it a try and report back in the comments so I know how I did. If you want an easier but still very delicious braised beef recipe, then please check out this video for pot roast. It's probably my favorite recipe of 2023. I'll see you there.